Every crack represents a life I've saved. You know what I mean?
Francis Ford Coppola's method of modifying the characters to fit the actors themselves becomes even more interesting when you consider that the role of the crazy photojournalist is perhaps one of the closest to its real-world counterparts. In this video, we'll talk about how Hopper's own major artistic risk led to a career slump that Apocalypse Now would help fix, how Hopper would bring even more insanity to the production, the inspirations for the photojournalist character, and the story behind the Colby character that was cut from the movie, including the crazy death scene of Colby and the photojournalist that didn't make it into the final film.
Terminate. It's extreme prejudice. Are you an assassin or a soldier?
When the patrol boat docks at the Kurtz compound, they are greeted by a man who introduces himself as a photojournalist.
I'm an American!
His name is never mentioned in the movie, but in the call sheet, we can see that his name is Hurley. In Coppola's 1975 rewrite of the script, the character's name is Moonbee, and is an Australian soldier who has deserted his post. In the script, Moonbee says that he convinced the Montagnard army not to kill Willard and the patrol boat crew, but it was difficult because they don't want Kurtz to leave. Moonbee also says that Kurtz was going to kill him for being a deserter, but didn't because Moonbee had hidden a huge stash of various drugs in the jungle. None of this is in Milius' 1969 version of the script, but in that version, we learn that Kurtz's army is being funded by a huge stash of drugs.
This is the way the fucking world ends. Look at this fucking shit we're in, man!
At the time that Apocalypse Now was in production, Hopper's career had been slowly dying for 6 years, all because of one movie. But before we get into that, I want to give you a couple of movie recommendations you can find on this episode's fantastic sponsor, Mubi. If you don't already know, Mubi is a curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from all around the globe, and features everything from iconic directors to emerging auteurs. If you're in the United States, you can watch Nicholas Winding Refn's hyper-stylized follow-up to Drive, Only God Forgives. When it first came out, people didn't really know what to make of it, but it's finally now getting the recognition it deserves. And the soundtrack is so frickin' cool. Check it out. Or check out the unique and hilariously bizarre The Death of Stalin, a silly satire surrounding the insanity following the death of Russian dictator Joseph Stalin. I'd say it's kind of like Drunk History meets Blackberry. Discover the best of cinema at your fingertips, streaming anytime, anywhere. You can try Mubi free for 30 days at mubi.com/CinemaTyler. That's mubi.com/CinemaTyler for a whole month of great cinema for free. Or join CinemaTyler on Patreon at the $5 level to get extended access to Mubi as a perk. Now back to the show. In 1969, Hopper had become an icon for the youth with his movie Easy Rider, which he directed, co-wrote, and starred in. The super low-budget movie made a ton of money, and the screenplay even earned Hopper an Oscar nomination. In the same year, he had a role in the John Wayne classic True Grit.
I can't do a thing for you, son. Your partner's killed you, and I've done for him.
The movie also featured another Apocalypse Now actor, Robert Duvall.
I call that bold talk for a one-eyed fat man.
Fill your hand, you son of a bitch!
But in 1971, he wrote, directed, and starred in The Last Movie, and it was a box office failure. Hopper attributed the failure to Universal refusing to distribute the movie properly. After seeing the enormous success of Easy Rider with young people, Universal allowed Hopper to do whatever he wanted, but they were horrified by the abstract, experimental nature of the movie he turned in.
I wasn't going to re-edit the movie, which is what he wanted me to do.
They recut it.
No, they never could recut it because I had Final Cut. But I had Final Cut and cut my own throat.
Despite winning the Critics' Prize at the Venice Film Festival, the movie is really only now being recognized for its artistic merit. Nonetheless, after the failure of the movie, Hopper was basically exiled from Hollywood for nearly a decade, acting in only a few low-budget movies.
As far as my career was concerned, when it was delightful to hear that I was going to go do anything, anywhere.
I didn't know till 2 weeks before I came here that I was even going to be in the picture, much less play the photojournalist, the guy in tatters and rags, taking photographs, trying to explain what this was all about and how it's blown his mind away.
On October 1st, Coppola made a memo that Hopper's character is, quote, a very important element of the script in that he is really the comic relief.
I should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across floors of silent seas.
Stay with the book.
Hopper arrived in the Philippines on September 6th, and a production assistant named Tony Dingman was given the job of keeping an eye on him. Dingman said, when Dennis arrived, he brought so much laughter and excitement. Hopper was a pretty eccentric guy known for his erratic behavior. One night, Hopper had been drinking and threw a bottle at troops on patrol in Manila. They might have shot him if it hadn't been for Dingman dragging Hopper away. Hopper was always late to the set and would arrive drunk and stoned. Dingman was tasked with keeping him on time and sober, but soon, Dingman and Hopper would arrive late to the set and they'd both be drunk and stoned. Dingman, Hopper, and the prop guy would go out drinking and visit a local massage parlor 2 or 3 times a day for a happy ending. Hopper had brought his girlfriend with him to the Philippines, and one time at 2 in the morning, the crew was woken up by the sound of screaming coming from his room and then pistol shots. Hopper ran into assistant director Jerry Zeismer's room to hide. He told Zeismer, "I'm okay, she just gets like this sometimes. It doesn't last long."
He said if you take my picture again, I'm gonna kill you. And he meant it.
In an interview for NPR's Fresh Air, Eleanor Coppola was asked why Francis cast Hopper during a period in which Hopper was experiencing some serious issues and had a drug problem.
Well, I don't think Francis actually realized he was in that kind of shape. He thought he was a really good actor, and he had a lot of admiration for him, and he was cast in a role, a Green Beret role, and when he really got out there, Francis realized there's no way that he could play this the Green Beret, and he had to then sort of invent a part for him because he thought he was very talented and there must be some way to use his gifts. And so Francis has the great ability to make the part fit the actor rather than the other way around. If the actor comes and can't play the part as written, he rewrites the part. And he certainly did that in Dennis's case and tried to somehow utilize the character that he was, because that was one of the issues in the Vietnam War, is the use of drugs and the availability of drugs. And in fact, there in the Philippines, because of where we were there in Asia, there were drugs available and cheaply, and things that aren't available just here in while everybody's home in Los Angeles, so that there was experimentation.
Also, let's not forget that, like Coppola, Hopper was an alum of B-movie mogul Roger Corman, and Coppola must have had an admiration for Hopper as an auteur filmmaker who took big risks and didn't let studios compromise his artistic vision.
The character that Dennis Hopper played wasn't even in the script. I just made it up out of, when I saw how wacky it was, I made it out of the character that's in the Conrad.
Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness features a Russian traitor who's completely devoted to Kurtz and is described as looking like a Harlequin or jester.
And what they give me is, in the book, is the Russian Jew who has all these things like tarot cards. So that's who the photo news journalist became, was Ouspensky's tarot card fool, who had all the secret ones of the world, but he couldn't remember how to use them.
I have Dennis Hopper playing a spaced-out photojournalist with 12 cameras who's here because he's going to get the truth. You know, and it's all, man, you know, and he's a wonderful apparition.
Several of the lines that Hopper says are basically taken directly from the book, such as,
You don't talk to the colonel. Well, you listen to him. The man's enlarged my mind.
The character was also loosely based on Sean Flynn, who was the son of the famous Hollywood Golden Age actor Errol Flynn, best known for playing Robin Hood. Sean Flynn was an actor like his father, but in the 60s he made the switch to being a freelance photojournalist documenting the Vietnam War in very high-risk situations, even finding himself in combat several times. In 1970, Flynn and another photographer named Dana Stone came across a white 4-door sedan blocking the road while riding motorcycles to Saigon, and the car belonged to several missing journalists. They decided to go up to the checkpoint to interview the Khmer Rouge rebels, who marched the two men into a nearby tree line, and they were never seen again.
Sean Flynn took off into the jungles of Cambodia to bring the news of the war to the world. That was April 6, 1970, and Sean hasn't been accounted for since. I ask you, whatever happened to Sean Flynn? If you don't help, who will?
The photojournalist character was also loosely based on a photographer that makes an appearance in Michael Herr's book Dispatches, a photographer named Tim Page. Page was a friend of Sean Flynn, and even more of a daredevil when it came to finding himself in dangerous locations that few photographers would go to. He miraculously survived the war despite several incidents that earned him life-threatening injuries, the worst of which was a time when a helicopter he was in landed to retrieve some wounded soldiers, and a sergeant directly in front of Page stepped on a landmine, blowing his legs off and sending a 2-inch piece of shrapnel into Page's brain.
I mean, who really wants to watch the Queen walk around, you know? I mean, it's just not interesting.
At least here you're seeing history made. You're seeing something exciting.
On the set was a photographer named Chaz Gerretsen, whose photos have made appearances throughout the series. In 1968, Gerretsen crossed the Cambodian border on foot to become a freelance photojournalist in Vietnam. There, he became friends with photographer Dana Stone, the photographer who went missing with Sean Flynn, and worked as a cameraman for ABC TV and sold photos to American publications. In the early 70s, Gerretsen photographed the American invasion of Cambodia and then covered the 1973 Chilean coup d'etat. Things weirdly came full circle when, in 1976, Coppola was looking for a photographer and hired Gerretsen after seeing his incredible portfolio of war photography. So now a real war photographer would be taking photos of a fake war. In 2021, Gerretsen published the book Apocalypse Now: The Lost Photo Archive, and it is so cool. I'll put a link in the description. Here's another picture of Hopper in regular military fatigues. According to Gerretsen, Coppola changed Hopper's look every day until he ended up looking like what we see in the movie. After a week, Coppola asked Gerretsen what he thought. Gerretsen said that the character definitely wouldn't have film canisters taped to the strap of his only camera, saying that it made him look like a hippie wannabe combat photographer and that he needs more than one camera. The next day, the prop guy told Gerretsen that they need his cameras for Hopper's character, and that they'd reimburse him for new ones. The funny thing is that it took Coppola a week to convince Hopper not to tape the film canisters to his camera strap. Hopper was annoyed because that's how he carried his film when he did photography. This is Hopper's most famous photo that is part of LA's Museum of Modern Art collection. I think it's titled Double Standard.
And I really appreciate Francis' writing. Even though he does drop it on you sometimes, and it does take you sometimes, an idiot like me, a whole day to learn it.
Things were quite difficult with Hopper. He had a really difficult time remembering his lines and would improvise just a bunch of stuff so insane that everyone would cry laughing when they would watch the dailies.
Are you doing a story on it?
No, man, I'm not doing the story, man. No.
What are you doing?
Well, you see, this is the story. You've arrived. Oh, you've been a lot of places, and I've been a lot of places, but this is the war, man. This is it. You just look it right in the face, motherfucker, if you can stand it. Ooh, you just grab it and you just take it and you kiss it right on the mouth if you can stand it.
What's your name again?
Why did you say that to him in the scene?
Who?
Something clever like that. When he
You know
says, who
why?
are you?
You know
Why didn't you say,
why?
who are you?
Because I haven't learned my lines yet.
I know,
that's
you've
why.
had him for 5 days. You should say
But,
that, all that in the scene.
I do, but you see, the director says, you don't know your lines. And then, like,
Well,
you know...
if you know your lines, then you can forget them. Because
Oh,
you know more or less.
I see. But that's what I'm trying to do. Forget those lines.
No, but it's no fair to forget them if you never knew them.
The point is this: there was no dialogue. We would sit. Francis and I would sit in the morning. He would write these things. We'd write these things and so on. Write them out, and he'd say, "Now this is a general idea." So okay, great. Then we'd go and improvise. There was nothing. I mean, he's talking about learning your lines. What lines, Francis? Good God, I've been improvising everything.
You should have just said that to him.
Well, I mean, yeah, but I mean, you know. But I mean, I'd say, oh, well, I mean, about learning my lines, I guess I didn't learn my lines. Yeah, well, you should learn your line. There wasn't any lines. There wasn't any end to the movie. There was no character for me to play.
Because so much of Hopper's dialogue was improvised and it would be extremely difficult to cut around, Hopper's scenes were shot with 3 cameras, wide, medium, and close-up, which meant 3 times the film for the already costly production. Willard Chef and the photojournalist walk up the hill to the base of the Kurtz temple. This was a complicated dolly shot past the whole front of the Kurtz compound that took a lot of preparation. Storaro's key grip made a makeshift bridge for the dolly track that stretched over 100 feet. The place really smelled because of all the chicken crap everywhere, and the key grip laughed and said something in Italian like, "Mr. Coppola has us down here working in this shit." And Coppola said, "Well, that's life." And the key grip said, "No, that's not life, that's the movie business. In life, I have a nice place that smells good." Willard sees a couple of Green Berets who are now part of Kurtz's army, and recognizes one as Colby, the assassin who was sent to kill Kurtz before him. This group of Kurtz's men looks similar to the group that John Milius described in the first part of his original script. Basically, they look like psychedelic soldiers who have been living in the jungle. It's a really cool and surreal looking shot. We see fog rising from the ground without any in-world explanation. The production brought in tons of dry ice to add to the weirdness. It's kind of funny to imagine Kurtz's army seeing the boat arrive and putting dry ice around and setting off colored smoke grenades to make themselves look cool. Willard takes a closer look at the man who was once just like him, but now completely under Kurtz's spell.
Colby.
In an outtake, Willard asks Colby about all of the bodies around.
Last night. NVA regulars. We killed most of them. I think.
The character of Colby is a really interesting one and was meant to be a much bigger part of the story originally. In the summer of 1976, when Coppola hired G.D. Spradlin and Harrison Ford for the mission briefing scene, he also hired Dennis Hopper at $5,000 a week, but Coppola wasn't sure how he'd use him. When Hopper was brought on, the initial thought was that he would play Colby, but when Colby's role started getting diminished as Coppola reworked the story on location, Hopper was put on the newly invented photojournalist character. For Colby, Coppola went with an unknown actor named Scott Glenn, who would go on to have a celebrated career, my favorite role of his probably being Jack Crawford in The Silence of the Lambs.
Clarice.
Glenn actually paid for his own flight to the Philippines and was originally going to play a background part before Coppola upgraded him to the role of Colby, but still, he was only paid $664.40 per week while playing the part. During the deadly typhoon that shut down the production, Glenn risked his life going to the countryside to rescue locals. This was not out of character considering that not only was Glenn a veteran of the Vietnam War, but to prepare for the role, he and Charlie Robinson would spend all night patrolling the jungle next to the Kurtz temple and lived in huts eating roots and leaves with the military advisors. Despite all of that preparation, almost all of Scott Glenn's work on the movie wound up getting cut during the edit.
The heads. You're looking at the heads. Sometimes he goes too far, and he's the first one to admit it.
What's interesting here is that the heads are real. I mean, not like that. The heads were played by actors who were in boxes that were dug into the set so that only their heads poked out. They only appear in a couple of shots and were decently far away from the camera, which was an amazing detail considering how miserable it was to play one of the heads. Those actors had to be basically buried from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. with one break for lunch. It was really hot and they were in direct sunlight, so little umbrellas would be placed over them in between takes. One of the heads was played by Tony Detman, who actually introduced Francis and Eleanor to each other. During the part where Hopper and Sheen are walking up to the temple, Coppola was getting really frustrated with Hopper not knowing his lines and challenging him on everything. So one morning, Coppola went to assistant director Jerry Zeismer and told him that Hopper was driving him nuts. Coppola came up with hand signals so that Zeismer could communicate to him how he thought the scene was going. Coppola said, "Look, I'm going crazy. I want you to signal to me what you think, to help me, see? Look, pull your right ear if I should stay with the same shot and go again. If I should change the setup, wipe your forehead, see?" In her diary, Eleanor Coppola wrote, "During one take, Dennis Hopper backed up and stepped right at a girl's cheek and collapsed part of the container she was in, nearly stepping on her face. The mud on both sides of the dolly track was deep, and people kept slipping. Dennis and Fred Forrest both fell during takes. The sound man had someone hold onto his belt in the back and stabilized him as he followed the actors, so that he wouldn't fall with the boom. On take 26, Hopper yelled, 'What do you want me to do?' And Coppola yelled back, 'I told you 100 times there are some fucking heads on the fucking walkway, and you're saying what a great man Kurtz is, and you're trying to bridge that contradiction. Explain to Willard that I know it looks funny, but the guy goes too far, but he admits that he's a good man. Action.' They tried doing the scene at the temple steps again, but nothing was working, and Hopper was still challenging Coppola on every little thing until Coppola finally exploded, saying, 'I've let you do it your way for 2 days, just once. Do the scene the way I want it.' Even when Coppola got angry, he rarely shouted, so all the cast and crew got very tense when this happened. Finally, Hopper laughed it off and did the scene the way Coppola had asked. According to Eleanor, he never got that part the way he wanted it.
Sometimes, he goes too far, and he's the first one to admit it. Sometimes he goes too far, and he's the first one to admit it. And if you could have heard him just 2 days ago to talk about their life and poetry and philosophy, you can't call him anything. If you could have heard the man just 2 days ago, if you could have heard a man, God, you were gonna call him crazy?
Just do what I ask. When I say just explain the poem, and the reason you're explaining the poem...
See, I need to know the reason.
I'm telling you the reason. I can't ever talk more than a fucking sentence. The reason that you're explaining the poem to him is because you want to indicate to this guy that he does not understand Kurtz, that Kurtz is a strange man. What you're trying to express is that he's kind of in the twilight zone. That his twilight zone is our twilight zone. It's America's twilight zone. So that he will not judge him. So that he will accept him as a great man and help him.
In a deleted scene, Willard asks Colby if he feels anything when he kills people, and Colby replies,
Yes, I feel.
What?
Recoil. I feel the recoil from the shotgun.
Willard tells Colby that he's going to go pee, but he actually goes to talk to the photojournalist. The photojournalist, who realized he's annoyed Kurtz enough that he will be killed, had escaped into the jungle, but came back because he had something important to tell Willard. Willard finds a knife and a corpse and hides it under his shirt. While the photojournalist is demanding that Willard uphold Kurtz's reputation when this is all over, Colby sneaks up and shoots him. Willard throws the knife at Colby and Colby falls. While Colby is dying, he tells Willard to kill Kurtz. I do think that the movie is better without this. In the final film, the photojournalist understands that he will probably be killed and disappears into the jungle with an unresolved fate, similar to Sean Flynn. And it is much more profound to think that Willard didn't need to escape, and Kurtz would allow Willard to kill him if he can find the will to. In the new 8mm behind-the-scenes footage on the Final Cut Blu-ray, we can see them filming this scene. There was a part where the photojournalist's arm was blown off, so we can see Hopper with the fake arm. This is the part where the knife was thrown at Colby. Dennis Hopper was upset by the scene in which his character dies. They used a dummy of him for a wide shot of him getting shot and falling, and they had to wait until Hopper had left the set to bring the dummy out. Eleanor Coppola wrote, I shot an interview with Dennis Hopper. One of the things he said that interested me the most was that he thought that filmmaking was in the same phase of development that art was during the cathedral building period. When they built those great cathedrals in Europe, they employed stonemasons, engineers, fresco painters, etc., and created the work through the combined talents of many. By the 19th century, art evolved to the point where the major work of the day was being done by individual artists working alone at an easel. Dennis was making the point that now filmmaking involves the talents of many departments, and perhaps eventually major films will be made by one person with a video porta pack. On the next episode of Making Apocalypse Now, Marlon Brando finally arrives on location. If you thought that Dennis Hopper was nuts, just wait until you see what a troll Brando was. A special thanks goes out to my patrons. Head on over to the CinemaTyler Patreon where you can get some cool behind-the-scenes pictures for free, the current bonus material and ad-free videos for $1, and all of the bonus material I've made for $5. Your support really helps the channel.